Our words have power. Tonight we take our words and we hold them up next to our deeds. As the great Maimonides writes, "What is teshuvah but that we should abandon sin and remove it from our thoughts and resolve in our hearts never to repeat it? We repent of the past and we proclaim before God that we won't return to this behavior. And if we need to make confession with our lips moving, we need to say these things out loud that we have resolved in our hearts." To speak words without intending to abide by them, says Maimonides, is akin to taking an impure lizard with you into a purifying mikvah. All that we say matters. All that we say together and individually this evening matters. For tonight we resolve to make teshuvah, to turn and search for our better selves, to reconcile, to repair, to make amends with one another. So may our words match our deeds. May our hearts lead us in return. Along the way, over these next 24 hours, tradition invites us to fast, as you know. Though at any point, if that might pose a danger to your health, I invite you to mindfully care for yourself and break your fast. In fact, Jewish law is very clear and unambiguous on this point. And we do have some water if anybody has an emergency situation or just needs something to drink. There's some water in a bucket just behind the doors for everybody here. And certainly that applies to everybody at home too. Please take care of yourselves and one another. We now invite our president, Sarah Mervine, along with her husband, Mark Schiff, to light the festival candles. The blessings can be found in your silver machzor on page 9. Yeah, absolutely.
Human spirit is the lamp of God, searching out what lies within us. Guided by the flame of conscience, on the sacred night we search for truth. Shine your light upon us as we strive to serve you. May we find safety in your faithful love. We light the flame of healing and forgiveness. On this atonement night, we give thanks for love.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav, v'tzivanu lehadlik ner, lehadlik ner, shel yom HaKippurim. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, shehakayanu v'kiyamanu v'higyanu l'zman hazeh. We rise before the open ark. Page 14. Yom Kippur, the Jewish people's festival of the soul, and Kol Nidrei, its sacred portal, a night of deep emotions, a night, as the psalmist wrote, to rejoice with trembling. We rejoice at the sound of Kol Nidrei, rhythmic words of release from vows, oaths, and promises to God we failed to keep. We tremble at the melody, music of spiritual amazement. It fills us with awe as we stand before God and the Torah. We rejoice that we stand together, strengthened by community in this hour of shared weakness and humility. We tremble, for tonight we confess our flaws, admit our imperfection, and acknowledge a power far beyond our understanding. We rejoice that we commit ourselves to great endeavors because we feel so deeply and think so nobly. We tremble, for we find that our ideals are far greater than our ability. Our promises surpass our might. We rejoice in the freedom that is Kol Nidrei's true gift, the freedom to begin a new year without fear of failure, to aspire to be God's image in the world. We tremble because we are mortal. We rejoice in our gratitude for life. We rejoice with trembling and enter Kol Nidrei to face our humanity. Page 16. Veshiva shel mala, uveshiva shel mata, al da'at hamakom, ve'al da'at hakahal, anu materin lehitpalel, im ha'avayanim.
With one voice, assembled sages, past and present, declare, all may pray as one on this night of repentance. Let none be excluded from our community of prayer. With one voice, God and congregation proclaim, all may pray on this day of return. Let all find a place in this sacred assembly.
As we sing through Kol Nidrei, beginning on page 18, we will sing through it 3 times, and I invite you, the congregation, whether you're on Zoom or here in person, to join us the second time through. Kol Nidrei, Vesarei, Valcharamei,
All shall be forgiven, the entire community of Israel, and the stranger who lives in their midst, for all have gone astray in error. Our service continues on page 22 with the call to prayer, the Baruch Hu. We continue on page 24. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bidvaro ma'ariv aravim v'chochma poteach she'arim uvitbuna meshane yitim umachalif et hazmanim umisader et hakochavim b'mishmerotehem barakia kirtzono borei yom v'layla golel or mipnei choshech v'choshech mipnei or uma'avir yom umevi layla umavdil ben yom uven layla Adonai tzevaot shemo el chai v'kayam tamid yimloch aleinu le'olam va'ed Baruch atah Adonai hama'ariv aravim. Page 26, we read together in English. Love beyond all space and time. Your love enfolds your people, Yisrael. We receive it in your teaching, your gift of Torah, sacred obligations, discipline, and law. So let us speak these teachings when we lie down and rise up, and find joy forever in your Torah and mitzvot. They are the very essence of our life, ours to ponder and study all our days. May we never lose or be unworthy of your love. Baruch atah Adonai, Ohev Amo Yisrael. For you are blessed, the one who loves your people Israel. Shema.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad.
Please be seated. Page 30.
Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha bechol levavcha ubechol nafshecha ubechol meodecha ve'hayu hadvarim ha'ele asher anochi mitzavecha hayom al levavecha Meshinantam levadnecha, vidibartam aham, beshivtecha beveitecha, ubleftecha vaderech, uvshokbecha uvkumecha, ukishartam leot al yadecha, mehayu letotefot beineinecha. Uktatam al mezuzot beitacha uvisharecha leman tizkeru va'asitem et kol mitzvotai v'tem kedoshim lelohechem ani Adonai Elohechem Asher hotzeiti etchem me'eretz Mitzrayim liot lachem le'elohim ani Adonai Elohechem Adonai Elohechem Amen.
I'd like to share a poem by the great Israeli poet Yehuda Amichai, who brings what I would call a secular Israeli love of God into his poetry. Elohim shochev al gabo mitachat latevel, tamid asuk betikun, tamid mashu mitkalkel, ratiti liroto kulo, ach ani ro'eh rak et suliot na'alav, va'ani bocheh. Vihi Tihilato. God lies on his back under the world, always busy with repairs, always something going wrong. I wanted to see all of him, but all I can see are the soles of his shoes, hence my tears, and this is his praise. Perhaps this is his praise. Page 40, Michamocha. Page 43. When despair for the world grows in me, and I wake in the night at the least sound, in fear of what my life and my children's lives may be, I go and lie down where the wood drake rests in his beauty on the water, and the great heron feeds. I come into the peace of wild things who do not tax their lives with forethought of grief. I come into the presence of still water, and I feel above me the day-blind stars waiting with their light. For a time I rest in the grace of the world, and I am free. Together, Baruch Atah Adonai, Hapores Sukkot Shalom Aleinu, Ve'al Kol Amo Yisrael, Ve'al Yerushalayim. Blessed One, you spread over us a canopy of peace, a shelter of shalom over all Israel, your people, and over all Jerusalem. Poet Marcia Falk writes, sitting before a window with no desire but to see the heart clearly, you watch the shadows come and go. You let yourself be forgiven. Clouds across the sky, mending the roughened edges here and there, partway through your life. During the blessings of our Amidah, I invite you to take a moment, those of you joining us on Zoom, perhaps even away from your screen, just listening and participating with us. Let the beautiful melodies flow through you. Perhaps you can gaze through a nearby window. Those in person can too. Perhaps you can see those clouds, the last ones of the day, shrouded in shadow. Let them mend your roughened edges this evening. Prepare to forgive all of us, and we prepare to be forgiven. We turn to page 46. I invite you to rise if it's comfortable to do so for the Amidah.
Adonai Sevatai Tifta Ufia Gita Hilateha. Adonai, open my lips, that my mouth may declare your praise.
Shemo.
Magen Abraham, Bezrat Sarah.
Amen.
Atagi boy, le'olam Adonai, mechayei hakota, rav le'oshia, mechakel chaim mechesed, mechayei hakol berachamim rabim, somek nobeim merofevolim, umatir asurim, umgayem emunato, lishenei afar.
Baruch Shemo.
Mechayei hakol.
Amen. Page 62.
Ya'aleh v'yavo v'yagia, nireh v'yiratzeh v'yishama, v'yipakim v'yizacher, zichronenu v'iktonenu, zichron avotenu v'imotenu, zichron Yerushalayim v'yakotchecha, zichron koloncha beit Yisrael, lefanecha livlitor letova, lechain ulchased ulrachamim, lechaim ulshalom, beyom hakippurim hazeh. Zochreinu Adonai Eloheinu b'letova.
Eternal our God, remember us. Amen.
Ufogdeinu b'livracha.
Be mindful of us. Amen.
Mehoshienu v'lechaim.
And remember and redeem us for a life of goodness and blessing. Amen. Page 75. Prayer for gratitude. It doesn't have to be the blue iris. It could be weeds in a vacant lot or a few small stones. Just pay attention, then patch a few words together and don't try to make them elaborate. This isn't a contest, but the doorway into thanks, and a silence in which another voice may speak. Baruch atah Adonai hatov shimecha lechana ela lehodot. Blessed are you, Adonai, whose goodness deserves thanks and praise. Please be seated. The great medieval poet Moses ibn Ezra said that our sins are like veils upon our faces, hiding us from our Maker. So we can think specifically this day as beginning to lift the veil, beginning to unburden ourselves of a weight that we have been carrying, to be able to find renewed breath and renewed life. When we take an opportunity to place our hand next to our chest, I do not think of this as an act of self-flagellation. Rather, I think of it as an invitation for those rusted-out gates covering our hardened heart to gently, ever so slowly, creak and squeak open. Because the truth is that we can be stubborn. We can be slow to admit and fess up to our own misdeeds. But it doesn't have to be that way. And this is the night where we can take culpability, acknowledge our wrongs together as a community, and begin to make repair. Page 82. Let's read together in English as we begin the vidui, the confession section. Our God and God of all generations, may our prayers reach your presence. And when we turn to you, do not be indifferent. Adonai, we are arrogant and stubborn, claiming to be blameless and free of sin. In truth, we have stumbled and strayed. We have done wrong. Please rise. Page 86, we continue with the Vidui Rabbah. We'll read this responsively. Al chet shechatanu lefanecha bezadon uvishgaga ve'al chet shechatanu lefanecha bedibur peh.
The ways we have wronged you deliberately and by mistake, and harm we have caused in your world through the words of our mouths.
Al chet shechatanu lefanecha be'imutz halev ve'al chet shechatanu lefanecha betifshut peh.
The ways we have wronged you by hardening our hearts, and harm we have caused in your world through careless speech.
Al chet shechatanu lefanecha bechachash uvechazav ve'al chet shechatanu lefanecha birchilut.
The ways we have wronged you through lies and deceit, and harm we have caused in your world through gossip and rumor.
Al chet shechatanu lefanecha biflilut ve'al chet shechatanu lefanecha bezilzul horim umorim.
The ways we have wronged you by judging others unfairly, and harm we have caused in your world through disrespect to parents and teachers.
Al chet shechatanu lefanecha bevidui peh ve'al chet shechatanu lefanecha behona'at re'ah.
The ways we have wronged you through insincere apologies, and harm we have caused in your world by mistreating a friend or neighbor.
Al chet shechatanu lefanecha bechozek yad ve'al chet shechatanu lefanecha b'masa uve'matan.
The ways we have wronged you through sinews, and harm we have caused in your world through dishonesty in business.
Together, for all these failures of judgment and will, God of forgiveness, forgive us, pardon us, lead us to atonement. Top of page 88. Al chet shechatanu lefanecha bagalui uvasater ve'al chet shechatanu lefanecha bifrikat ol.
The ways we have wronged you openly and secretly, and harm we have caused in your world by losing self-control.
Al chet shechatanu lefanecha begilui arayot ve'al chet shechatanu lefanecha b'ma'achal uvemishteh.
The ways we have wronged you through sexual immorality, and harm we have caused in your world through consumption of food and drink.
Al chet shechatanu lefanecha beyetzer hara ve'al chet shechatanu lefanecha b'neshech uve'marbit.
The ways we have wronged you by giving in to our hostile impulses, and harm we have caused in your world through greed and exploitation.
Al chet shechatanu lefanecha belatzon ve'al chet shechatanu lefanecha b'nitiyat garon.
The ways we have wronged you through cynicism and scorn, and harm we have caused in your world through arrogant behavior.
Al chet shechatanu lefanecha b'sinat chinam ve'al chet shechatanu lefanecha b'tum'at sfatayim.
The ways we have wronged you by hating without cause, and harm we have caused in your world through offensive speech.
Al chet shechatanu lefanecha b'lshon hara ve'al chet shechatanu lefanecha b'tzarut ayin.
The ways we have wronged you with a slanderous tongue, and harm we have caused in your world through a selfish or petty spirit.
Together, for all these failures of judgment and will, God of forgiveness, forgive us, pardon us, lead us to atonement. Please be seated. Those of you who have spent time visiting the great Jewish towns and cities of Europe, the formerly great ones anyway, know that it is a strange experience. In college, I went to Thessaloniki in northern Greece. Before World War II, about 80,000 Jews lived there, roughly half of the city. David Ben-Gurion, Israel's first prime minister, in fact, traveled to Thessaloniki in 1911 to study a model of a small but functioning Jewish society. These days, the most visible Jewish presence there is a museum that happened to be closed on the day that I visited. In the summer of 2013, I guided a group of teenagers through Prague and Krakow and Warsaw. In each of those places, I felt a hollowness in the pit of my stomach. Because things were going on, life was thriving, business was going on as usual. But I felt the need to bear witness to something that had been erased from view. In Krakow, our group began lunch one day with a brief motzi prayer. We sang together in the town square, and after singing, we immediately felt very strange about it. It was uncomfortable. Many eyes were on us, but it didn't feel like a generous sort of curiosity. Did not feel that either our prayer nor our presence was particularly welcome. Perhaps the most jarring moment that I experienced that summer was in the tiny village of Oswiecim in Poland. Walking down the streets, we found no indication whatsoever that just steps away, over 1 million people had been systematically murdered in Auschwitz-Birkenau. Now, on some level, I can understand. People just want to go on with their lives. And it's much easier for the past to just stay in the past, in its place, behind museum glass. On the other hand, as William Faulkner says, the past is never dead. It isn't even past. We Jews are fiercely committed to memory. Some might say obsessively committed to memory. We record our traditions in sacred texts like the Talmud, with later commentaries and generations of scholars preserving the original text with the commentary of subsequent scholars around the edges of every printed page. We remember the Exodus from Egypt at every holiday and every prayer service and every Shabbat when we make Kiddush. The Ten Commandments remind us to remember, Zachor, et Yom HaShabbat, remember the Sabbath day. We remember the Shoah on Holocaust Remembrance Day, and we remember our martyrs on Tisha B'Av. We say Yizkor, the memorial prayer, also with the same root for memory, for our loved ones who have passed away, as we'll say tomorrow afternoon. Why are we so focused on remembering? And how should our need to remember inform our lives as Jewish Americans in this coming year? While following one of my first ever Shabbat services at TBT, I got a glimpse of what memory can look like here on the shoreline. That week, Wally, who's the facilities manager at the First Congregational Church, pointed out some masonry to me after the service. It was just steps away, but I wouldn't have seen it if he hadn't pointed out. This particular stone commemorated the life of someone named Lettuce Bailey, a woman who was enslaved in Madison in the late 18th and early 19th centuries. Lettuce and her mother were owned by the Reverend Jonathan Todd, who was the second ever pastor of the First Congregational Church. Doing some research, I learned that this was not unusual. In 1790, roughly 50% of ministers, clergy, in Connecticut owned slaves. Wally told me that the marker left for Lettuce Bailey was called a witness stone, and it was inspired by Germany. Perhaps some of you were involved in creating this project. I've talked to a few congregants who were. Perhaps some of the young people in here studied them as part of your curriculum in school, or will. After doing a little more research, I found out that these memory stones were inspired by, of all places, Germany. As part of reckoning with the legacy of the Shoah, towns there began laying Stolperstein, or stumbling stones, along the sidewalk in front of the formerly Jewish homes. Pedestrians would literally stumble upon them and hopefully remember a period of horrific history never to be repeated again. And then, of course, there's perhaps Germany's largest stumbling stone of all, which is the 62,000 square foot monument to the Jews who perished in the Shoah. It's in the heart of Berlin, right outside the Brandenburg Gate. You see, Germans keep their greatest failure central to their republic, literally and figuratively, in the heart of their city. Our country's most grievous moral failure is certainly the enslavement and abuse of millions of human beings over hundreds of years. That is why Guilford and Madison schools have pursued the Memory Stone Project. But memory stones only work as part of a larger equation, like how we really only understand mathematics by doing the practice sets. Abstract knowledge in a book, or even inscribed beautifully on a stone, it needs to live in the muscle in order for it to be real. In Germany, children learn Holocaust history in a much more comprehensive way than in almost any American classroom. Teachers do not shy away from the horrors of torture and mass murder. Their lessons warn of the dangers of fascism, even in classes such as biology and art. Almost all Germans will visit a concentration camp during their school years. The head of the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance says this: Germany knows the magnitude of its responsibility for the worst crimes in European history and strives to come to grips with this legacy. If there is anything Germany can share from its own experience, it is this: facing up to the grim truth of what took place is the only path to reconciliation. A past that is not examined fully and honestly will remain a burden for the future. The system there certainly isn't perfect, but people are aware of the past. They learn not in order to feel guilty, but in order to remain vigilant. If we care for healing, for unity in this country, we must stand for examining our past fully and honestly too. I believe these memory stones are an example of a project that can play a role in that. But the task is great. After more than 2.5 centuries since abolition, our country has not overcome the racial inequities that began when the first people who were enslaved landed on our shores in the 16th century. Today, 1 in 3 black children live in poverty. The median black family owns just 2% of the wealth that the median white family owns. 1 in 3 black men will spend time in prison. 1 in 3. In our state, startling racial disparities are evident in such areas as healthcare outcomes, policing, and housing. Connecticut's affordable housing deficit in particular is one of the primary contributing factors, making us one of the most segregated states in the country. I grew up in a mostly white suburb of Chicago. I was fortunate to go to very good schools, where I learned early on that, well, the South had the plantations, and the North, we had the Underground Railroad. Of course, the truth isn't quite so simple. Nearby here in New London, sugar and molasses merchants also traded in slaves. Enslaved people in Connecticut lived on farms as large as many in the South. Thousands of acres in Connecticut, New York, and Rhode Island, they all had plantations that used slave labor, even if we don't call them plantations. Although Providence Plantations was the name of Rhode Island before they changed it, I think, last year. Not only did our state benefit directly from slavery. It built massive wealth and prosperity directly on the backs of enslaved people. Of course, all of this took place long, long before many of our families had come to America. But did you know that the Jews in America in the 1860s were very divided on this question? Rabbi Isaac Mayer Wise, who is the most prominent founder, I think, of American Reform Judaism, sometimes defended slavery, seeking a reasonable compromise in order to avert war. Jewish soldiers fought in both the Union and the Confederate armies. But as we all, I hope, teach our children, regardless of our immediate role in creating injustice, we have a responsibility and a privilege to address it. The Mishnah says, the work is not all ours to do, lo alecha hamlecha ligmor, but we are not free to desist from that work. V'lo ata ben chorin lihibatel. You're not free to desist from it. And in many respects, our country has made significant progress. So many people in this room on Zoom have been involved in that progress in various ways. The civil rights movement, the passage of 3 landmark pieces of legislation in the 1960s on the federal level, reforms in police departments, corporations, and schools, more balanced representation in higher education and the public sphere in general. But so much work still remains. And I worry that if we don't tell the truth about slavery's painful, real history and its ongoing, equally real consequences, then we will not be living up to our mandate to make this a better country for all its citizens. The great Elie Wiesel taught, without memory, there is no culture. Without memory, there would be no civilization, no society, no future. Of course, nobody is excited to remember painful things. But there is an ethical dimension to memory too, a Jewish ethical dimension. One that I felt that day in the hollow pit of my stomach outside of Auschwitz. Elie Wiesel, he committed his academic career after surviving the camps to teaching the necessity of moral witness. He said, we must, quote, turn our suffering into a bridge so that others might suffer less. Do we not then have an ethical obligation to remember the past? By remembering past suffering, we can aim to erase future suffering. Though it is not a guarantee, it is a necessary start. That tension between recollection and erasure takes shape in the Torah, which recounts the story of Amalek. Amalek was what we would today probably call a terrorist. He preyed on the weak people marching in the rear of the Israelite camp. And his story comes with instructions at the end. In the book of Deuteronomy, we read, remember what Amalek did to you on your journey after you left Egypt, how he surprised you on the march when you were famished and weary, and cut down the stragglers in your rear. Therefore, you shall blot out the memory of Amalek from under heaven. Don't forget. Did you catch that? Timche et zecher Amalek mitachat hashamayim lo tishkach. You shall blot out the memory of Amalek under heaven. Don't forget. How strange. We are commanded to erase the memory of this villain by remembering him actively. As Elie Wiesel says, we bear witness to build a moral bridge to the future. We have to remember before we can reconcile. We have to reconcile before we can heal. That, teaches the Torah, is the only true way to teshuvah, to move beyond the horrors of our past. I was distressed when a teenager recently mentioned to me that she had never studied the Shoah in her public school classroom, even though it's a legally mandated element of Connecticut's curriculum. As Jewish Americans who have known persecution ourselves, we must bear witness to our own suffering. We must bear witness to the anti-Semitism in our past and in our present. And we must also bear witness to the suffering of our fellow Americans. That includes teaching the truth about slavery, from its historical horrors to its modern-day impacts. Our children deserve this. They deserve to see us model the Jewish values of intellectual honesty, of moral responsibility. These calls unite the ancient Hebrew prophets with the modern ones who challenge us, like Moses, who says, "Watch yourself that you do not forget that God brought you out of the land of Egypt, from the slaves' barracks. You shall love the stranger, for you yourselves were strangers." Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel, leader in the civil rights movement, he says, "Morally speaking, there is no limit to the concern one must feel for the suffering of human beings. Indifference to evil is worse than evil itself. In a free society, some are guilty, but all are responsible." Elie Wiesel taught us that it's important to remember the suffering of the past because if even one person learns how to be more human, you will have made your memories into a blessing. We must, he says, turn our suffering into a bridge that others might suffer less. My great-grandfather, Max, came to America at the age of 14, traveling alone. His parents stayed behind in Belarus, and they were later killed in a pogrom. His brother, with whom he came to live in Wisconsin, was also later killed in a freak accident. I never got to meet my great-grandfather. I never got to learn about his life or his suffering or how it impacted him. But whether he knew it or not, he turned that suffering into a bridge to allow a better life for my grandmother, my mother, myself, and every future generation in our family. That is a precious gift, and it comes with a responsibility that I hope never to squander. So tomorrow morning, as we're beginning to feel those first hunger pains, I hope we'll reflect on the purpose of this day, the deep purpose of Yom Kippur. Our ancient prophet Isaiah demands this of us when he asks, "What is the fast that God desires? Is this it? A day to bend like a reed, to lie in sackcloth and ashes? Is such a day acceptable to God? Only if it helps to lighten the burdens of those in distress, to release the chains that bind, to rise to the call of brothers and sisters in need. Only then, says the prophet, will our light shine out from the darkness, and the darkness will blaze like the noontime sun." How shall we find the strength to take the road less traveled by? Avinu Malkeinu, how shall we come to know the purpose of our existence? Avinu Malkeinu, how shall we learn not to live our lives in vain? Avinu Malkeinu, how shall we get out of our indifference this year? Avinu Malkeinu, how shall we distinguish between truth and falsehood? Avinu Malkeinu, how shall we find the answers to our questions? Avinu Malkeinu, how shall we gird ourselves with strength to seek the answers? Avinu Malkeinu, be gracious to us and answer us. Empower us and give us courage. For the answers are both in you and with you. Page 114. Please rise.
Avinu Malkeinu, Shema Koleinu. Avinu Malkeinu, Chotanu lefadnecha.
In every age and every generation, it's our responsibility to see the little tears that we can help to stitch shut. That's perhaps why the Aleinu prayer, which started in the Rosh Hashanah liturgy, grew over time to come into many, many different services in our regular Friday night service too. This is where it all started, with that prophetic vision of oneness and healing. Page 116, we stay standing for the Aleinu prayer.
Aleinu l'shabeach l'adon ha'kol, l'ateit gerula le'yotzeh bereshit, shelo asanu k'goyei ha'aratzot, ve'lo samanu k'mishpachot ha'adama, shelo sam chelkeinu kahem, ve'gor aleinu kechol hamonam, ma'anachnu gorim, u'mishacharim u'modim, lifnei melech, malchei hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu.
119. This holy night concludes with memory. Our last thoughts always are of those we have lost. We miss them especially tonight, yearning for their presence by our side. The service we have shared was once theirs. They spoke and sang these ancient words. They prayed, requested, repented, and yearned for better lives, as we have done. Flawed in their deeds, imperfect in their faith, they still drew strength from their tradition as we seek fortitude in ours tonight. What was good and beautiful in their lives once gave us joy and now inspires us to reach higher. The knowledge that they loved us deeply brings comfort to our hearts. And so we light candles of remembrance and gratitude, and we speak this timeless truth, Zichronam Livracha. Their memory is a blessing now and forever. We pray that their goodness will live on in our lives, planting seeds of kindness and hope for generations to come. Our hearts now turn to those loved ones who have left this earth, but left something important of themselves behind in our hearts. Together we recite these hallowed words, page 122. Yitgadal v'yitkadash shmei Rabbah, be'alma divarach yireutei v'yamlich malchutei, b'chayechon u'v'yomechon, u'v'chayei d'chol beit Yisrael, v'agala u'v'yizman kariv v'yimru, Amen. Yehei shmei Rabbah mevorach le'alam u'le'almei almaya, yitbarach v'yishtabach, v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh, V'yit hadar, v'yit aleh, v'yit halal, shemei dekudesha b'richu. Le'ela u'le'ela mikol birchata v'shirata. Tushbechata v'nechamata, da'amiran be'alma v'imru, Amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shmaya, v'chayim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru, Amen. Oseh shalom b'imromav, hu ya'aseh shalom. Aleinu ve'el kol Yisrael, ve'el kol yoshvei tevel, v'imru, Amen. May the source of strength give us the strength to remember and bring to fruition those attributes of the people we loved who now live on in us. As together we say, Amen.
Shalom b'imromav.
Please be seated. Like so many things this year, tonight's service was a little different and maybe didn't happen exactly the way we had been hoping last year, but nevertheless was so special and so deeply meaningful. I'm so grateful for everyone's participation this evening, whether you're here in person or on Zoom. We're all equally together in this TBT community. And Cantor and I look forward to greeting our friends on Zoom briefly after the service ends tonight. I'd like to say a special few thank yous. First of all, to Cantor for your beautiful music, for Walter for being the man of support behind that beautiful music, the TBT choir, and for the exceptionally beautiful rendition of the Bruch Kol Nidrei by Patty and Bill. Thank you so much for your beautiful music. It's just so deeply appreciated. I'd like to say thank you also to Kim and to Bonnie, to Corey and the tech team. They worked so hard and so long to bring this to fruition and make it seem so seamless and easy, which I guarantee you it was not. So from the depths of our hearts, we say thank you. Tomorrow we invite you back on Zoom for our Yom Kippur morning service at 10 a.m. We'll have a discussion group on the topic of emotions in the Psalms, led by Rabbi Susan Landau-Moss at 2 p.m. on Zoom. Our Yom Kippur family service will happen in person here at the Woodwinds in Brantford, and we're going to be meeting in the outside but covered little deck area. Regardless of the rain or the shine, and there's supposed to be a little rain, we'll be there together. It will be outside but covered, and we'll have a very meaningful time. Look forward to see all of our young families and children there. At 2:30, thank you for reminding me, 2:30 p.m. Mincha will begin at 4 p.m., available on Zoom, followed by Yizkor and Ne'ilah. And one more reminder that as we are fasting, there are many people who live in food insecurity in our area, and they and we so appreciate your generosity in bringing back those paper bags filled with food on September 20th when you see Kim's smiling face in the parking lot to take back your High Holiday Machzor and your generous donations. And thank you. Marge Percy writes, "You must empty yourself of injuries, insults, and incursions. Go with empty hands to those you have hurt. Make amends. It's not too late. It's early and about to grow. Now is the time to do what you know you must, but you feared to begin. Your face is dark too as you face inward to face yourself, the hidden twin of all you must grow to be. Forgive the dead year. Forgive yourself. For what will be wants to push through your fingers. May we all be written for goodness, blessing, and life in the book of life this year. L'shana tova tikatevu." Please rise. Friends, you came in peace. Be blessed in peace and good health during this fast day. Cantor and I wish you an easy and meaningful fast. Tzom Kol Gemar Chatima Tova. We'll see you again tomorrow morning. everybody? Gallery them so we can see everybody who's here.